Hello once again. I hope you are enjoying your ethics course so far and that you're finding some of the questions to be thought-provoking and challenging. I've enjoyed reading your responses. One thing I would want to remind you of at this point, particularly now that we're talking about moral arguments, when you look at an article or an example. That's not very good grammar. But if you look at an example of moral reasoning, the question is not so much whether you agree or disagree with what the person is saying, but to take a look at the logic that they're using. I'll give you an analogy. If you were a doctor and a patient comes in and presents some symptoms to you, uh, they're not really asking you whether you find them to be an attractive person, an engaging person, or a person you would like to be friends with. What they're asking you for is to assess their condition and to make a diagnosis. Well, the same thing when we look at ethics questions. People will present all sorts of thoughts and will have passion for those thoughts, sometimes be very passionate, but that does not necessarily mean that they have presented a good argument. So when you're asked to evaluate a situation, to look at what the ethics questions really are that are being addressed and what the reasons are for people's moral beliefs, you need to sometimes scratch a little bit beneath the surface and make that determination. Of course, there's always time within the article to post your own thinking, but that isn't the primary point of most of these assignments. Well, today we're dealing with Chapter 3 on evaluating moral arguments. And the question comes up, what is moral reasoning? Well, moral reasoning is like reasoning with anything else, like doing a math problem or working a scientific experiment or planning a trip or anything else, where you have to use critical reasoning, where you have to think and use logic to work your way through it. So moral reasoning is critical thinking, is critical reasoning. Well, let's start off. What is a statement? A statement or a claim is something that's either true or false. Well, that seems easy enough. We live in a world right now where people claim to have alternative facts, but on its face, that doesn't seem to make much sense, does it? Something is either true or it isn't. It isn't alternatively true. That's the relativism we talked about in earlier chapters, that something that's right for you may not be right for me, so therefore the facts are different. Well, here's a statement, a claim. Murder is wrong. 1 and 1 is 2. Shakespeare wrote The Tempest. Well, 1 and 1 is 2 can be proven in mathematics, and Shakespeare wrote The Tempest as a historical fact that can be fairly assuredly verified. Murder is wrong may have another basis upon which it is founded and may require some additional discussion, but I think you can make that claim. For example, if you were asking me if murder is wrong and you had the intention of murdering me, I certainly could give you several reasons that would show that it is indeed morally wrong. All right, statements and arguments. When at least one statement approves or proves or attempts to prove, pardon me, reasons for believing another, it's called an argument. We tend to think an argument as being some kind of a fight, but an argument is nothing more than the lining up of proofs to prove a point, to prove a statement. A statement that's being supported by arguments leads to a conclusion. The supporting statements are called premises. Okay? Identifying arguments. An argument is needed to prove something. We've said that. The most reliable way to identify arguments is to look at the conclusion. So if you're reading a tract on somebody's thinking about a particular subject, say for example, murder is wrong, you might do well to go to the end of the statement and see what their conclusion is. The conclusion is usually a summary of the thinking, and it kind of gives you a direction that they have gone. So look for the conclusion. And just because somebody makes a variety of claims, of unrelated and uh, sort of inarticulate claims, does not mean they have proven a point. Anybody who's spent any time on Twitter or Facebook knows that there are many strong opinions, there are many conclusions that are drawn, and often there are few facts or sensible supporting arguments. Two forms of argument are a deductive argument is one, and an inductive argument is the other. A deductive argument is supposed to give logically conclusive support to a conclusion. A statement is made, a series of, premises are laid out, and a conclusion is drawn. So, for example, if I say, and this isn't a moral argument, this is a factual argument, but if I say, for example, if it is Monday, then I will work. Today is indeed Monday. Therefore, I will work. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? If one thing is true, then the support behind it is true, and then the conclusion can be true. All right. A strong inductive argument, and an inductive argument is an argument that leads to a probable conclusion. So, for example, I might say, for example, it is cloudy outside. The smell of rain is in the air. The sidewalk is damp. Hear thunder and lightning. Well, it's probable that a rainstorm is about to occur or is occurring. That's an inductive argument, okay? So sometimes the premises that people will make are implied, that various things imply a conclusion, and the more specific those statements are that make the implication, the more they can be checked out. Hazy thinking often implies hazy conclusions. All right. A moral statement is a statement affirming that an action is right or wrong. For example, capital punishment is wrong. My brother Bob lied, okay, or should not have lied, rather. So it's should not, right, wrong. These are moral statements. Moral statements in moral arguments, every moral argument should offer at least one premise that is a moral statement. For example, without a moral premise, we cannot make a moral argument. We cannot establish what should or ought to be done solely on the fact that something is. We can test moral premises. To test a premise, consider all the possible circumstances under which it may be morally acceptable, quotes, for example, to cause a person's death. If we say that to cause a person's death is wrong, well, we might ask, well, is it always wrong? Is it wrong if you're defending yourself? Is it still wrong if it's an accident, truly an accident? How about in war? Is war justified to cause a person's death? How about to save others' lives? Is it still morally wrong to cause another person's death? Well, you might think various reasons that those could be wrong or that they might not be wrong, but you need to consider the possible circumstances. You want to avoid bad arguments where at least one of your premises is wrong. If your premises are wrong, then your argument is wrong. You can't draw the conclusion that you've set out for. You will find in your book a series of moral arguments that have problems with them. They're fallacies in moral reasoning. You will also have a part of your assignment this week that involves a movie which was based on a play or a short story from back in the 1920s. So it may be somewhat dated in its language somewhat, but it's fun to watch. And take a look and see what kinds of moral fallacies, reasoning fallacies there are in presenting arguments. And you have a little assignment on that to take care of. So take a look and ask yourself, do I ever do these things? And take a look perhaps at Facebook or at Twitter or whatever your source of seeing people's making moral cases is, and see whether they're violating any of the principles of good argumentation. So I would say to you that if you are evaluating moral issues, if you're planning to speak or write about them, make sure the person or yourself has proven the claim. That you've made a claim, for one, you've made a moral statement, and that is provable, that the argument uses good reasoning and logic, and that you have considered alternative views, that it's not just my way or the highway in moral thinking. Well, thank you. I hope you enjoy the chapter, and I continue to look forward to seeing your responses in the course.